What we're going to talk about today is the air system, or in fact the compressed air system that you find in modern day vehicles today, in heavy vehicles. The compressed air system operates the brake system in the truck, including the park brake, and as well as in most trucks will actually operate the clutch or assist you in working the clutch. The air system is broken up into two separate categories, or two separate systems if you like. There's one system for the front brakes and there's one system for the rear brakes. Theoretically, meaning that if one fails, the other one will still take over. You'll find on the instrument panel on your truck that there is two gauges. Okay, now in the truck that we utilize, which is the FD Hino, it actually has two separate gauges, individual gauges, whereas a lot of trucks like the Isuzus and the Mitsubishis will use actually one gauge, but they'll have two needles on that one gauge, which represents two systems. Either way, you will always have two systems of air systems in a truck anyway. Now, if we look at the instrument panel here, you'll see down here the gauge on the left clearly signed as being for the front, and the gauge on the right hand side again clearly marked as the rear. Now, with the rear system is usually the biggest in capacity because it operates most things, if you like. So the front system just basically will work the front brakes. The rear gauge or the rear system will work not only the park brake, the rear axles, airbags if the truck is fitted with airbag suspension as well. Okay. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that overnight, most trucks will have a minor air leak of some description where the air will actually dissipate or leak out of the tanks. Once the air has leaked out of the tanks, the vehicle is immobilized. In other words, you can start the truck up, you could try to move it, but in fact it won't move anywhere because the park brake system, which is a spring brake system, is actually locked on when there is no air pressure in those tanks whatsoever. So when you start the truck up in the morning, for example, even if you wish just to move it a short distance, a couple of meters forward off the dock to open up your tailgates to load the truck up, you cannot move the truck at all until you actually have the system up to pressure. Okay, now as you can see again with these gauges, both the needles are above the red section, which means that we could start the truck up, release the park brake, and we could be driving straight away. There's no big issue. But you'll find that as soon as, in particular, the rear system, once it drops down into the red section, what will happen is you physically can release the park brake, but the actual brakes themselves will remain on until the air pressure is built up. Okay. Now, some people are a little bit confused with how do you fill the air tanks up, for example. The air tank is very similar to your home air compressor in the way it operates. So in other words, when the system drops below its desired operating pressure, there's a solenoid which kicks in on the side of the air compressor, and then the air compressor itself will then replenish the tanks back up to pressure once again. So you don't actually have to go to the service station and fill your tanks up, so to speak. While the engine for the truck is running, on the side of that main engine there is an air compressor which will be running when the engine is operating, and it keeps those tanks replenished. Quite often you will hear as you're driving your truck yourself, and even when you're driving your car beside other trucks, you'll be driving down the road and you'll just hear a ktch, which is the air system in the vehicle actually pumping up to capacity. Once it pumps up to capacity, there's a short release of air, if you like it would be in your home air compressor, where the system actually shuts down because it is actually up to pressure. Every time you operate the clutch, the brake, the park brake, it uses up a portion of that stored air pressure in those tanks. Once the pressure drops below the desired level, as we mentioned before, the compressor just automatically pumps the tanks back up. So it's almost a fail-safe system, if you like that. It will look after itself. But there is gauges, and it is a mechanical system, so eventually, mechanically meaning it's going to fail eventually. So the whole point of the exercise of having gauges there is so the driver can keep a bit of a check, as you would on all instruments and all gauges that are on your instrument panel. And the operator of the vehicle needs to know exactly where those needles should be sitting in normal operating conditions. And once you can recognise that the system is dropping down below where it should be operating, you really need to get the truck truck off to the side of the road in a safe place and pull a truck up as soon as you can, because again, as that air pressure is depleting out of the tanks, the park brake will start to self-apply. It won't come locking on like you just pulled it on with your hand, for example, but as the pressure decreases, the brakes start to apply themselves on, and if you have just a minor air leak, well, those brakes will come on nice and gradually and smoothly. If you have a major air leak where you're trying to rock up through the tank, or you've broken a fitting off the tank and the air is just expelled straight out of the tanks, then that park brake will just lock straight on, and you won't go anywhere until it's repaired and you build the air back up in the tanks again. So we at KMS Driving School will always, in the initial lesson, talk our students through that air system, because it is a vital thing to know about as to what it would be, the engine temperature and the revs and the speed that the truck's going at. So yeah, hopefully that's sort of shed a bit of light on the stories.